Hi, you probably have come to this board and ask yourself, what is this all about and why did Jan create this? I want to walk you through it quickly so that you can see my reasoning and my thinking behind it. So why I created the cards in the first place is something that I already described on the website. I needed a very quick way to engage in critical and strategic conversations about innovation with leadership that is very short on time, but also with the people who advocate for innovation and for professionalizing innovation in large organizations. So it helps them because each card is like an occasion to talk about this specific topic that might be lacking or might be important as a next step or building block when, well, creating an innovation strategy or even trying to create the structures for innovation to stay in the organization. So all the cards are actually described on the website. I don't want to go into these cards now. They are just all down here. What I rather want to do is start up here. So I usually like to use the playing field mental model to talk about innovation. So for me, this third playing field is very important as well. And so I really like the work of Ralph Christian Orr, who always talks about dual innovation and the three playing fields. And we actually use this also for us in our work, where we have the playing field of optimizing the core, the typical exploitation, as it's also termed quite often. Then we have the exploration playing field, where we say creating the new. These are the extremes. And in between is unfortunately this tricky, ambidextrous playing field, reshaping the core, where, for example, lots of digital transformation initiatives fall into. What we also did is here on this board, we mapped into a business model canvas, because people are now used to the business model canvas, typical examples of innovations that are usually pursued in this particular playing field. Yeah. So in optimizing the core, this would be commercial innovations, small service improvements, cost-saving programs, continuous improvements of processes, and so on and so forth. And of course, also the incremental product updates, maintenance and feature updates. Accordingly, in the most radical playing field, in creating the new, all aspects of a business models can be innovated upon. So yeah, there will be lots of building blocks of the business model canvas will be touched. So yeah, that's all I can say to that. And here it's tricky. Here it might be an update of some of these building blocks, or you might maybe, let's say we work a lot with mechanical engineering companies. You might, for example, switch your revenue model to, let's say, an equipment as a service model, things like this. And this then will also touch and impact other building blocks. So we will innovate upon them here. And we have some examples of what gets usually innovated here in these building blocks. Why do I say that as an intro or an overture to the whole thing? Because it is really important to differentiate all the kinds of innovations and talk about these different kinds of innovations in the very beginning. Because only if you have done so, you can think about the right pathways these innovations will then take in the organization. Because usually it's this large stream, at least from what we observe in our work, this large stream of lots of initiatives. This is an illustrative figure. That's not from a real company or something like this. Everything is illustrative here. Let's say we have thousands of projects that go into a pipeline which are not put on the right path yet. But we have to do that, because otherwise we have methodology misfit, and this is always very bad. And we apply, let's say, business model innovation approaches or these big design thinking projects to very small incremental stuff, which is totally over the top. Or we apply very small continuous improvement approaches to larger innovation initiatives, which need a totally different approach. This is not something that we want. And this is why the playing fields help us thinking about that, and also help us thinking about, what would be an appropriate way of approaching this, and what would be an appropriate pathway. Yeah. And so I just put that here. Let's say we have 600 projects which are process improvements. This is the just do it route. You don't need any elaborated innovation process for that. You just have to get going and that's it. Quick service design tweaks, it's also easy. Maybe in some large organizations you have a coach for this and they help you and you apply some service design methods. Some journey mapping, some service blueprinting, and that's it. Product and feature upgrades, well, this can be tricky. You might, it's good if you have a product culture there and use all these methods and tools that we also might use in business R&D down here, but still on a much smaller level with much smaller iterations, usually on feature level. I leave the tricky in between, reshape the core pathways out for now. Let's look at the extremes again. Some of the projects, you could also argue that these are the horizons. It depends. I mean, if that model makes sense, that's a question for itself. It's just one way for me to visualize it, to talk, to at least get the conversation starting with leadership. But if you have that now here and you bring some projects into this path, you might have to differentiate between the classical tech R&D and the business R&D, which usually should run in parallel, but some projects are mere tech R&D. And they then go to the classic tech R&D. Most organizations we work with, they have that. But what they don't have is the typical business model exploration or business R&D. Cultures, processes, tools, and so on and so forth. And this is also very much related to what I just mentioned, to a product culture on a smaller level when you improve in the core, because the ways of working there also might apply there, but on a much smaller level. And then when it comes to reshaping the core, all these business process automations, they are basically also service design projects. So you could use all the tools and approaches from service design there. It's just an internal service in the end. That's it. And then you have these business model digitalization projects. Well, of course, they could also use a portion of everything we do down here. And with my innovation system design card set, I'm not so much interested in this. Oh, and by the way, the color coding is red, means the red shirts. I got inspired by Frank Mattes, who always calls them the red shirts, according to blue ocean theory, where this is the red ocean, and the blue shirts. Yeah, so this is the color coding. So the red shirts are not so interesting for the innovation system design card set. This is why I just said, okay, it's not the card's focus. There might be an example pathway. Maybe I add some more in the future, but it's not the focus here now. Interesting is already the in-between field, reshaping the core. Yeah, there are some examples. Unfortunately, I don't have a for-profit organization mapped out yet, but I mapped out the English government, their digital transformation, process or gates that teams have to pass through and the support structures that they've built. You just click here and then you can watch it and see how that actually works. Many of these projects might also pass through the same funnel that I show here below, but I focus most of the time on this playing field, creating the new or reshaping the core with some more radical projects, because I see that many organizations struggle there the most, even though this makes up the majority of projects, of course, in an organization. And there's also the majority of cost savings here. Yeah, I'm totally aware of that. So this is a generic innovation funnel. It's just the one that I've taken from Steve Blank as an example here. Mapped out to this innovation funnel are here the cards now. And this is how I use them. That might be interesting for you as a viewer or as a user of these cards, how I actually apply them. Well, I take them from down here and I take those cards which are important for the respective client I'm working with or in the respective teaching environment I'm working in. And each card has a color code. So I didn't came up with better categories yet. So they are still up for discussion. Let's walk through them quickly. We have the long-term building blocks, sometimes also called innovation vehicles. So this is something we can walk and talk to. It's an institutionalized either program or maybe even a physical or digital place that never goes away, even when the CEO changes, where I can walk to. And then there are also people who run this program or this place, and they will never go away. Yeah. So examples would be an internal design studio, an internal innovation consultancy, the patent office, maybe a product apps community, the investment board should also be stable and never go away, maybe a corporate foresight function, and so on and so forth. Then there is something which we call the leadership moves. These are things that need to be decided by leadership and then be revisited every now and then. Every now and then means a cadence of every quarter, every year, every 5 years, every 3 years. It really depends. So this is this category. It's all purple. And examples would be, you need to create an innovation thesis and revisit it. You need to create a change narrative to make sense. You need to do, of course, portfolio management, exploit portfolio and explore portfolio. You should think about your innovation governance. It would be good if you would have an innovation career path model. You have to decide upon that. So these are more leadership decisions. But again, I'm not really sure if the categorizations are sharp. So the borders might be blurred between innovation vehicles and those. Then you have event and activity-based measures. This is something like campaigns that you launch every now and then, or that you have to do when you perform your work, like the typical sprints. If you have a dual-track agile approach, you have discovery and delivery sprints, or you might have innovation workshops. Maybe not the best way to do innovation, but hey, you still have it. You have hackathons, you have open innovation idea challenges, you have all kinds of things that are happening. But they are not places you walk and talk to. This is something that the teams do. That's why it's called events or activity-based measures. And last but not least, you have innovation knowledge. That's also very important. This is the thinking, the schools of thought, the philosophy behind all the things that you set up here in your innovation system that you should have heard of, at least depending in the industry where you are. So some industries should really have heard about service logic these days. For some, biomimicry might be interesting. Ecosystem and network thinking, of course, as well. And then the usual suspects. We need to, of course, think about how we define innovation. We need to even think in playing fields. That's a prerequisite that is often not in place. And so on and so forth. I don't want to go into each of these cards. And these cards here are just a bonus. These frequently encountered bad innovation practices, they are just in here to poke them a little bit if I talk with them, because it's usually the programs and things that they usually have in place. And then we discuss the pros and cons of those and how they are set up today. So this is the intro into the cards. So what I do then with these people who are invited to such a session, where we, in really short time, we want to discuss what is needed to get a repeatable innovation running and to really also transform the innovation funnel from a gauntlet into a funnel where teams can go through with tailwind, so to speak. We usually start with what I call the foundational blocks, the building blocks. If you don't have them, you usually shouldn't even think about how to start that, because then it will get complicated for these teams, or even ugly the more they progress, because there are no decision criteria in place, or they might encounter barriers that no one in the organization has ever thought through so far. And what are these foundational building blocks? It's these here. You can read yourself, so I don't read them now to you. And then we double click on each of them and discuss them depending on the interest. Of course, in a short intro session with people, you can only get them interested in everything. And when they then say, okay, we want to learn more, then we go deep into each of those. So I personally created a modularized slide set for each of these cards, and also working materials on moral, and so that we can then later work through them. And I'm of course not an expert in all of these cards. So whenever they really want to go deep on something, let's say innovation metrics, then I would have some experts in my phone book that I would recommend to them. So it did not happen that often yet, but for some it already happened, for the portfolio management, for example, and for thesis. Yep. So this is how I would use the cards. So we would discuss them. And once we discussed that, and we also agreed, okay, these are important building blocks we need to have in place, and how much do we have in place already, then we can, and this is a very idealized and how to say, yeah, it's an idealized way of how a team could run through the funnel here, where I used some of the cards to show them what we've observed in an organization. This is not from one organization. This is really rather an idealized version where we combine the best of vehicles and activities that best-in-class organizations use to make it easier for their teams to progress through the innovation funnel. In the end, you can see each of these cards as a reaction to innovation barrier that teams have encountered in organizations at a respective funnel stage. That's another thing. You could also use these cards this way, that you first map the barriers, that because organizations are often very aware of the barriers. And then you later on talk about the different cards that you bring with yourself and say, okay, you have this barrier that you can never decide from your idea competition or idea collection program. You will never have useful criteria to decide whether what they bring to you is an idea that's worth pursuing or not. So let them bring their own criteria with them. Let them pre-validate that at least a little bit. So kickbox program would be nice, wouldn't it? But before I throw in the cards, I usually let the people in the room discuss what they've seen and experienced before, so that I don't prime them too much. Because the most important card of all is, of course, this. It's the card that's empty. The vehicle they create themselves. That will hopefully also stay longer than if you just copy and paste what others did. But on the other hand, you need some inspiration, and that's what the cards are for. And maybe you can copy and paste elements of what others did and then combine it with your own way of working. And so what you see here, these blue lines are basically, this is a pathway for a team that wants to create the new in an existing organization. Yeah. So they might start and they might get supercharged with inspiration by certain things that are already happening in the very beginning. And then they might go through a kickbox program, which is then supported and powered by some innovation catalysts and a community of practice. Maybe it's combined with an unstructured time model. Investment board has to decide. Team might grow. They might now be allowed to have an additional person in the team. They go into discovery sprints. This needs some support from some things. I don't go into them now. They might go to the investment board again because they've gathered more exit evidence. And now they realize, oh, damn, now becomes a fully fledged team. We might not have the right pathway yet. So they might also go into a venture studio and then in public accelerator. That would be the external route. There are, of course, more routes. This was just one example here. But if they say, no, we incubate that internally, okay, then they might go into whatever structures exist here. I just put some example structures here. The incubator innovation lab also needs, again, support from other places and also other structures that are existing. Most important that I want to mention is this here, the tool stack. It's the biggest innovation prohibitor in most organizations that we see, at least here in Europe. And so on and so forth. Then they go to demo day, discovery delivery sprints, and so on and so forth. And then later there might come scale up structures if these even exist. But scale up's not that much our topic yet. So we have everything. We have so much to do with this already that I focus on this. Yep. So this is an example for a larger organization, create new venture in a larger organization. And this would be for a smaller organization, where it's usually not these big structures with labs and incubators and whatever, but it's just people that you walk and talk through and the team that needs to get the work done and then some other ways of deciding on things. Yep. So this is a short walkthrough that now became 20 minutes. Sorry for that. On how I usually use these cards. I hope that's interesting for you, and I hope also the cards are useful for you. The cards can be very well complemented with some of the tools that I mapped here. And this is just some educational material that we use, because underneath all this, underneath the innovation funnel, there are of course, the usual suspects in terms of the innovation approaches that teams might use. Yeah, effectuation, design thinking, lean startup, Scrum, whatever they need to make progress. Yep. Reach out to me if you have questions. I hope it's useful, and I hope the cards can also be useful in your work and to talk with leaders and innovation leaders about how to better create the structures to make innovation happen. Thank you. Bye-bye.